Before we dive into today's story, let me quickly remind you, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with your friends. Your support keeps us bringing more emotional, real-life inspired stories to you. And also tell me in the comments at the end, what would you do if you were in this situation? Sometimes life looks perfect from the outside. A loving marriage, a stable job, a peaceful home. But behind those closed doors, cracks can form. And those cracks, if ignored, can destroy everything. This is the story of David and Emma. To the world, they seemed like the perfect couple, happy, supportive, and in love. But one question, a single simple question, would turn their entire world upside down. That question was, "Emma, why do you know my boss's address?" At that moment, silence screamed louder than any words, and what followed was a journey of betrayal, heartbreak, and revenge. Stay with me until the end, because the way David transforms his pain into power is something you'll never forget. David always believed he was one of the lucky ones. While so many people struggled with broken relationships and messy divorces, he had Emma. Emma was the kind of woman who lit up every room she walked into. Her laughter was contagious, her kindness genuine, and her support unwavering, or so he thought. Their life together seemed picture perfect. They had been married for almost 6 years, and in those years they built a home filled with warmth. Dinners together every night, lazy weekends watching movies, long conversations about their dreams for the future. David, who worked tirelessly at his company, often thought of Emma as the anchor of his world. Every morning, she would pack his lunch with a sweet note tucked inside, and every evening she welcomed him with a smile. To him, their love was stable, unshakable. Friends envied their marriage. Colleagues at work admired David for having it all, a good career and a loyal wife waiting at home. Even David himself felt proud, as though he had achieved what so many only dreamed of. But life has a cruel way of hiding storms behind clear skies. Because beneath that flawless harmony, small cracks were beginning to form. Cracks David didn't notice, at least not at first. It started so quietly that David almost brushed it off. At first, it was little things. Emma spending more time on her phone, her screen quickly flipping whenever he walked into the room. She laughed at messages he never got to see, claiming it was just a friend from work. Then came the late nights. Emma, who once cherished their dinners together, began excusing herself. "David, I'm staying late at the office tonight." "We're swamped." He believed her. Why wouldn't he? She had never given him a reason to doubt her before, but deep down, something felt different. Their conversations grew shorter. Where once they had talked about everything, from silly jokes to serious plans for the future, now silence filled the space between them. Emma seemed distracted, her mind elsewhere, even when she sat right beside him. David tried to dismiss it as stress. Maybe she was just overwhelmed with work, he thought. After all, she had always been ambitious. But as days turned into weeks, the warmth in her eyes seemed to dim. The hugs became shorter. The kisses felt obligatory, not heartfelt. One evening, David reached out, placing his hand gently on hers as they sat on the couch. "Emma, is everything okay? You've been distant." She pulled her hand away too quickly, forcing a smile. "Of course, everything's fine. Don't overthink it." But her voice trembled, and David knew something was changing. Something he couldn't quite name. He tried to ignore the knot forming in his stomach, convincing himself it was nothing. But little did he know, those small shifts were only the beginning. A storm was brewing, one that would soon rip their entire world apart. At first, David forced himself to believe Emma's excuses. But suspicion has a way of planting roots, and soon those roots grew into questions he could no longer ignore. He started noticing patterns. Emma's late nights at work didn't match the schedules she used to keep. Some evenings, her makeup looked freshly done when she claimed to be exhausted from the office. And then there were the phone calls, whispered, short, always ending with her rushing to change the subject if he walked in. One Saturday afternoon, David found himself alone in the kitchen while Emma showered. Her phone buzzed on the counter. For a moment he hesitated. He trusted her, or at least he used to. But the screen lit up with a name that made his chest tighten. Mark. Mark wasn't just anyone. He was David's boss. The message read, "Dinner again tonight?" Same place. David's hands went cold. Dinner? Again? He didn't unlock the phone. He didn't need to. The words burned into his mind. When Emma came back into the room, hair damp, smiling as though nothing was wrong, David stared at her, searching her face for answers she wasn't offering. She kissed his cheek absent-mindedly and walked past, humming to herself. That night, David couldn't sleep. Every detail replayed in his head. The late hours, the hidden smiles, the way she mentioned Mark casually, as if he was just another manager. But why would she know his address? Why would she spend so much time with him outside of work? He wanted to ask her directly, but fear held him back. Fear that once the truth surfaced, their perfect life would never be the same again. So instead, David watched. He listened. He paid attention in ways he never had before. Each lie Emma told weighed heavier than the last. Each unexplained absence pushed him closer to the edge. The doubt inside him wasn't just doubt anymore. It was certainty waiting for proof. And soon that proof would arrive in the most devastating way possible. It happened on a quiet evening, too quiet. David had returned home earlier than usual, hoping to surprise Emma with takeout from her favorite restaurant. But when he walked through the door, he didn't find her in the kitchen or on the couch or even in the bedroom. Instead, he found her phone. It was lying on the dining table, screen unlocked. David's pulse quickened. He never snooped, never crossed that line. But tonight, something inside him told him the answers he had been dreading were right there, and he was right. A fresh text message blinked on the screen. It was from Mark. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." "Dinner at my place?" David's hands shook. His chest felt tight, as if the walls around him were collapsing. His mind screamed with questions, but one rose above them all. Why does my wife know where my boss lives? He didn't hear Emma come in until she was already standing behind him. Her eyes flickered to the phone in his hand, and in that instant, her face drained of color. "Emma," David said, his voice steady but laced with fire. "Why do you know where Mark lives?" She froze completely. Not a word, not a sound. Just silence, but silence speaks volumes. David stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "Answer me. How do you know his address?" Emma's lips parted, but no words came out. Tears welled in her eyes as her hands trembled. "That's what I thought," David whispered, his voice breaking. "I gave you everything. My trust, my love. And this is what you were hiding from me," Emma finally whispered, barely audible. "David, I didn't mean for it to happen, but the damage was already done. The truth was written in her expression, in her trembling hands, in her failure to deny it. She had betrayed him, and she knew it. David's heart shattered in that moment. He wanted to scream, to rage, to demand every detail, but no sound came out. Instead, he just looked at her, broken, devastated, hollow. "You've destroyed everything," he said softly. "And I don't even know who you are anymore." The confrontation was over. The silence that followed was heavier than any fight they could have had. And it was only the beginning of a storm. Neither of them could escape. For a long moment, Emma couldn't look at David. Her eyes darted to the floor, then to the phone, then back to him. Tears blurred her vision, but she knew there was no escaping now. "Please, just let me explain," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Explain." David's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Go ahead, Emma. Explain why my wife is sneaking around with my boss. Explain why you know his address." The room felt suffocating. Emma's hands trembled as she sank into the chair, covering her face. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't plan it. I swear I didn't." David's eyes burned into her. "Then how did it happen?" Emma exhaled shakily. "At first, it was just harmless. He made me feel noticed, David. He paid attention to me in ways you stopped doing. I told myself it was innocent, just dinners, just conversations. But then it went further." David's chest tightened, as though her words were knives piercing straight through him. "Further," he repeated, his voice cold. "So you betrayed our vows, our marriage. For attention?" Emma's tears streamed freely now. I was weak. I was lonely. And I didn't stop myself. I thought I could hide it, but when you asked me that question, she broke down sobbing. I knew it was over. I knew I couldn't lie anymore. David turned away, his heart pounding in his ears. The woman he had trusted more than anyone in the world had just torn his soul apart with a confession he could never unhear. I wasn't angry, Emma, he said quietly, almost to himself. I was heartbroken. You didn't just cheat on me. You destroyed the one thing I thought was unbreakable, our trust. She reached out desperate, her fingers brushing his arm. Please, David, forgive me. I'll end it. I'll do anything. But he stepped back, his eyes filled not with rage, but with a sorrow so deep it cut sharper than anger ever could. Don't, he said firmly. It's too late. The moment you let him into our life, you killed us. The truth was out. And with it, their marriage collapsed under the unbearable weight of betrayal. That night, David sat alone in the living room long after Emma had gone to bed. The house felt cold, lifeless, like a stranger's home. His hands trembled as he stared at the family photos on the wall. Smiling faces, vacations, birthdays, all of it now tainted by her betrayal. For hours, he couldn't move. He replayed every moment, every excuse, every lie Emma had told. Each memory cut deeper, but somewhere inside that pain, a new feeling began to stir. It wasn't just sorrow. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was something sharper. A fire. David realized that night that he had two choices: remain broken and defeated, or rise from the ashes of betrayal, and he refused to be a victim. Emma's affair had taken his love, but she wouldn't take his dignity. Mark had stolen his trust, but he wouldn't steal his power. David straightened in his chair, his eyes hardening with resolve. No more, he whispered to himself. They thought they could destroy me. But they're wrong. In that moment, he wasn't the same man anymore. The naive, trusting husband was gone. In his place stood someone sharper, stronger, someone ready to take back control. The plan formed slowly, methodically. He would expose Mark for the predator he was. He would dismantle his career, his reputation, his life, piece by piece. And Emma? She would see the cost of betrayal, not in words, but in consequences she could never erase. David began gathering everything: text messages, call logs, small details Emma hadn't bothered to hide. He reached out discreetly to colleagues, asking careful questions. The whispers were already there. Rumors of Mark's behavior, stories of women he had mentored a little too closely. David knew he could connect the dots, turn whispers into undeniable evidence, but this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming himself. Every note he wrote, every plan he set in motion, gave him back a piece of the strength Emma had stripped away. By dawn, David's decision was final. He wasn't going to plead for his marriage. He wasn't going to beg for her loyalty. No, he was going to rise. And when he was done, neither Emma nor Mark would ever forget the cost of betraying him. The next evening, David drove through the city with one destination in mind: Mark's house. The address had haunted him ever since he saw it on Emma's phone, and now it would be the battleground for his awakening. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, but his mind was clear. He wasn't going there as an employee, not as a victim. He was going there as a man who had nothing left to lose. When he rang the doorbell, Mark answered with his usual arrogant smirk. The smirk David had seen in countless board meetings, the smirk of a man who thought he was untouchable. "David?" Mark chuckled. "What are you doing here at this hour?" But David didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his voice steady, eyes unblinking. "You thought you could take everything from me. My wife, my trust, my life. But tonight, you're going to learn what that costs." Mark's smile faltered. I don't know what you're talking about." David pulled his phone from his pocket and held it up. On the screen, screenshots, text messages, proof. "You know exactly what I'm talking about." For the first time, Mark's confidence cracked. His face paled. His words stumbled. "David, listen, it wasn't—" "No," David cut him off sharply, stepping closer. "Save your excuses. You crossed a line you can't uncross. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed the trust of this entire company. And now I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." The silence between them was heavy, suffocating. Mark tried to regain composure, but David's voice carried a finality he couldn't shake. "You're finished, Mark. Everything you've built, everything you think you own, it's all going to crumble. And I'll be the one to light the match." Without another word, David turned and walked away, leaving Mark standing in the doorway, shaken, speechless, and powerless. For the first time, David felt it. Control. He wasn't broken anymore. He was the storm. The very next morning, David walked into the company headquarters, not as a broken man, but as someone with a mission. His steps were steady, his gaze unshakable. He carried with him the proof, the messages, the call records, the evidence Emma had carelessly left behind. But that wasn't all. Over the past few days, he had reached out quietly to colleagues, and what he uncovered only fueled his resolve. Mark's reputation wasn't as spotless as it seemed. Rumors of inappropriate behavior, late-night meetings with junior employees, small whispers that had been ignored. Until now, David pulled it all together, and now he was ready to strike. By noon, HR had the documents in their hands. The board of directors had been alerted. Within hours, whispers turned into chaos. Meetings were called. Investigations launched. Every eye in the company shifted toward Mark, not with respect, but with suspicion. For a man who had built his career on power and intimidation, Mark suddenly looked smaller, weaker. He tried to deny it, tried to mask his fear with arrogance, but the proof was undeniable. The fallout spread like wildfire. Clients grew uneasy. Deals slipped through his fingers. Every corner of his professional life began to crumble. And as it did, David watched, not with joy, but with grim satisfaction. At home, Emma tried desperately to repair what was left. She cried, she begged, she promised it would never happen again. But David was no longer the man who once clung to her words. He listened in silence, his face unreadable, his heart hardened. "You broke us," he told her one night, his voice calm but cold. "And some things can't be fixed." Mark's world was collapsing publicly. Emma's was collapsing privately. And in the middle of that destruction, David stood tall, not as a victim anymore, but as the one holding the match. For them, it was ruin. For him, it was justice. Months had passed since that night. David had rebuilt himself, not just professionally, but personally. The man who once trusted blindly was gone. In his place stood someone wiser, stronger, unshakable. He had reclaimed his life piece by piece. Mark's career lay in ruins, and Emma's betrayal had left her with nothing but regret. But David had learned something more valuable than revenge: resilience. Life doesn't always give second chances. People don't always honor the love and trust you offer. But betrayal, as painful as it is, can reveal your own strength. It can ignite a fire you didn't know existed. David had felt broken. He had felt helpless. And yet, in the midst of heartbreak, he discovered a power that no one could take from him, the power to rise. He looked out at the city from his apartment one evening, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed. What was once despair became fuel. What was once heartbreak became determination. And that's the lesson. If someone betrays you, don't let it destroy you. Let it awaken the strength inside you. Take control of your life. Reclaim your dignity, and rise above, stronger than ever before. Now, a word for you, the viewer. If this story moved you, drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced betrayal? How did it change you? I'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life inspired stories. Hit the like button if this video gave you chills, and share it with friends who love emotional, dramatic tales. Remember, betrayal may break some, but it can also forge the unbreakable. Rise above and let the world see your strength.